in hotel sales and marketing into... It's actually a very compact book when you think of everything that is in it, and the wonderful thing about it, if I may say this, Derek, is it is so engagingly written. It's like having a conversation with you. It's a very light read. It's a very good gallop, but there is so much packed in it. But I guess my opening question to you is going to be, why is the book relevant today? Because hotel sales and marketing is something which is now hardwired into everybody's DNA, isn't it?
Can the ladies hear me at the back? Good, splendid. Business travellers have to stay in hotels because that's their life. Everybody else who stays in hotels does so by choice, and they spend their disposable income on paying for the hotels or the restaurants. Now, when they do that, there are a lot of other organisations who'd like that disposable income. Hollywood would like it, record companies would like it, dress manufacturers would like it, and they have access to the best advertising agents and public relations people in the country, and they have enormous budgets, and we have to compete with them, and therefore we have to understand sales and marketing as well as the best of the advertising agencies do too. Now, we can win, we can beat them. When my company introduced short break holidays 50 years ago, we never realized that today it would be worth nearly £6 billion to the hotel industry in this country. Doesn't exist on the continent, but £6 billion here has come out of the disposable income of the general public and is spent with us rather than on television sets or whatever. That's why the book is relevant, because we have to learn about sales and marketing as well as the best advertising agencies, the best sales directors, etc.
And I guess the market is ever more competitive, isn't it? And everybody is after our hard-earned money. That's the way it feels to me, anyway. As I was reading through the book and in my conversations with Derek over the last 6 or 9 months, I have about 1,000 questions. I've distilled them down into maybe 15 or 20. But this will be a much better session, to be quite frank, if you ask your questions of him. It's a great opportunity to pick his brain, seek his advice, and get his opinion on things. So if at any time you've got a question, please don't hesitate to raise your hand. There is a microphone going around, because with all of the ambient noise in this area, obviously we need the microphones to get our message across. But I'll rattle on until hands start flying up. And I guess my next question to you is, what's the fundamental problem with... I've always felt that sales and marketing was the poor relation of hospitality management, of hotel management.
The fundamental problem has never changed. And the fundamental problem is that if you are you're now the chairman of the Toyota Motor Company, and you rely on the production manager at the factory to make the cars, and you rely on the sales and marketing director to sell the cars. And in the hotel industry, the production director is the sales and marketing director, but is trained, fully trained, how to make the hotel product, but has very, very little training on how to sell the hotel product. And that's the fundamental problem. Within the hotel, the restaurant manager is responsible for filling the restaurant. The conference and events manager is responsible for filling the banqueting rooms. And the reservations manager and the revenue manager are responsible for filling the bedrooms. What is the sales manager? Normally, the sales manager is a super rep. We don't want a super rep. We want somebody who actually is able to supervise the quality of the selling in conference and events, restaurants and everything else. And that doesn't happen. I think that I was the only sales and marketing director to ever be on a FTSE 100 company board. But that was because my company believed that it was about sales and marketing, and it wasn't just about the product.
And that's still the case today, yes? In your experience, yeah?
Right, so.
What about the silo mentality of the fact that far too many hotels think individually, even if they're within a group, and the sales manager, I remember this donkeys years ago, the sales manager reports to the general manager of a hotel, even if he has a regional remit. And every Friday the general manager says, what have you bought me? He never asks, what have you bought the group? And also the silo mentality within the hotel of the different departments, conference and banqueting against rooms, and the lack of cooperation.
There's a lovely story here which is particularly helpful for small hotels who worry about the fact that they're in competition with these major multinationals. I was talking to one of the major multinational managers once, and I said to him, who is your biggest customer? And he said, the Caravan Club. And I said, what are you doing to bring them back? He said, nothing. I said, why not? He said, they never go to the same part of the country twice. I said, so what are you doing to bring it back for another hotel in the group? He said, nothing. I said, why not? He said, you don't understand, do you? He said, every year we have a manager of the year competition, and the winner gets 3 weeks in the Bahamas, he gets a large cheque, he gets a silver cup from the chairman, and he gets his career prospects enhanced. If I gave the Caravan Club to one of my colleagues, they'd be far more likely to win the prize, wouldn't they? And I said, yes, they would. And I thought to myself, how do you fire the board? The board has sat down and worked out the ideal way of stopping the hotels cooperating with each other. And that is because it's operationally run. It's not sales and marketing run. Now, I was in Rhode Island, and we were thinking of spending the weekend at a multinational hotel in Boston. And I said to the girl behind the counter, do they have a special price for weekends in Boston? And she said, I've no idea, sir, you'll have to phone the hotel. And there went another booking, and I thought to myself, this girl hasn't been told that she's supposed to sell Boston. She hasn't been given the details of the special price. I'm taking up part of her time, for which she gets no credit. If she sells it, nobody's going to know, and nobody's going to supervise that she has sold it. And is it a surprise that she says, I've got no interest in this? And whose fault is it? It's the board of, we won't name the multinational concern, but it's the board who should be fired, not the poor girl. She's doing what she's told. And this is what annoys me so much about the industry, that the board doesn't realise that it's not about operations, it's about sales and filling up the restaurant and everything else.
That's a good story. I can so imagine that story, and the truth is it could be any brand, couldn't it?
Yeah.
They're very similar thinking across the piece. But what is part of the problem that sales and marketing doesn't have the status in hotels that it deserves and has in other industries? Is that part of it, that it just doesn't get the priority at board level, or at a general manager regards it as an inconvenience that he has to deal with?
I was talking to the chairman of another multinational, and I said to him, because I was consulting for him, the trouble with your company is that you've never given enough seniority to the sales and marketing executives. And he said, that's totally unfair. He said, several of our sales and marketing directors have been promoted to general manager. And I said, what a terrible waste of a good sales and marketing director. And it was a culture shock. Never considered that the sales and marketing director could be more important to him than a decent general manager. I'm not knocking general managers, absolutely essential people, beautifully trained, a credit to us all, but they don't know how to fill hotels, and that is what is going to send us into profit or is going to send us into bankruptcy.
Tell me the story about what are you selling? What are hotels selling? Is it a bedroom or is it an aspiration? And I know you've got an anecdote about this from Scotland, haven't you? But I just thought that might spark some questions off from the floor.
Oh yes, that's right. I was trying to fill a hotel in the Highlands in February, and it was a sort of hotel and location where if you were in a raffle, first prize would have been 1 week at the hotel and second prize would have been 2 weeks at the hotel. And My job was to fill a bus with people who would go and spend 2 weeks in Fort William. Dreadful. So we took an advertisement in the Glasgow Herald and filled the bus. And the advertisement in the Glasgow Herald was based on the first advertisements for hearing aids. The first advertisements for hearing aids only had one word in the headline, and the one word was deaf, question mark. And anybody who was deaf read it. So I put a headline into the Glasgow Herald which said lonely and bored witless, and the bus filled with people who were lonely and bored witless, because I could solve those problems for them. I admit it was going to be in Fort William in February, but I could solve the problems, and that's what they wanted to buy. That's aspirational. And when you are selling things, you are often selling aspirational. It is people who, at one of our hotels, we had a hall porter, and when he saw somebody coming through the door who he knew, he would come out from behind the desk and he would say, "Mrs. Smith, how lovely to see you." And she felt $1 million. And that is aspirational. And that is why she'd come. And she'd turn away all the other hotels which didn't say, "Ah, Mrs. Smith, how lovely to see you."
In case there are any residents of Fort William in the audience, can I just point out that other Highland towns are available? just add that rider on there. But I think one of the things I liked when I was reading the book is that it draws on your experiences, and if you're a sales and marketing student, so you're following a current curriculum in a hotel management school or taking a university degree, what this does is contextualize the learning and put it into real life experiences. And also, if you're running a hotel or you're running a hospitality business, filling a restaurant, again, it's got practical things in there. I've got to ask you, what can we learn from errors? What can we learn from the best examples and the worst examples of things that you've seen over the years?
I think the most stupid thing I ever did was I was lunching a client who was going to give me a sales conference. And I just about got this sales conference when we started talking about sales training. And my views on sales training were totally opposite to his. And by the time we'd settled on the sales training, I'd lost the conference. So I never again started to argue with my clients about anything. I think the best thing we did was this. You have to go back to 1974. Gracious me, that's 40 years. And they've just built 30,000 new bedrooms in London. And they've just had the Yom Kippur War, and tourist business has gone to nothing. And hotels are discounting their prices by 80%. And I said to my people, what we need is we need a large number of people to come in January for a minimum of 8 nights at full rate plus 50%. And they said, well, that's a lovely idea. Now, how on earth are you going to do that? So we actually hired the Albert Hall, and we got 2,000 people, 350 from America, 400 from Japan, 800 from Europe, and the rest from Britain. And we put on a teach-in. Now, in order to put on this teach-in, we had to have an attraction which was so good that they were going to come from all over the world to listen to it, and also so good that we could get British Airways to sell it for us. We had this international sales force of British Airways people selling this product. And what did we put on? We gave a man for 4 days' work the modern day equivalent of £250,000. His name was Vidal Sassoon, and he put on a hairdressing salon teaching. And the people who wanted to run their salons better came from all over the world. And that was in the midst of one of the worst slumps that had ever been in London, which only proves that it can be done. Now let me tell you something on a smaller scale. We're running the Carlton Hotel in Cannes, And on the Riviera, even on the Riviera, there are quiet periods. So we need to have something to attract the Americans to the hotel in the middle of November. And we look around the Riviera to try and find something which will be so business oriented that people will be able to come from America and set it off against their tax. And we found what we were looking for. We found a lovely modern crematorium. And at the crematorium, all the New Jersey morticians came one morning and they looked at the crematorium, and then they spent the rest of the week on the beach. And that was tax deductible. Now that's the American taxes, nothing to do with me, but the crematorium was what we were looking for. Now see how far you are away from, we've got to go and see IBM and see if they'll give us a couple of businessmen. You are way, way out there in creating products for which hotels are essential parts. But they don't have to be, well, we're in competition with other people, because we never see other people, or we never did. One year, Turkey invaded Cyprus in July. And this was very sad, and we were very sorry for everybody involved in the war. And everybody said how sad. And we said, let's phone the Ministry of Defence. So we phoned the Ministry of Defence and we said, what are you doing about getting all the people off the beaches who are now mixed up in a war? And they said, we've no idea, but leave your number and we'll give you a ring if we want you. So they rang on Saturday at lunchtime and they said, do you want to start a hotel booking service at RAF Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire? And we said, yes please. So we went off to Bryce Norton and we started a hotel booking service, and then we set up another one at Paddington Station, which is where they were all coming from Bryce Norton. And over the next 2 weeks we booked 5,000 people into the hotels in London who were all off the beaches. And we put up 50 for free because they hadn't got any money, so we put them up. We got letters of thanks from embassies all over London saying how public-spirited. Now, is it fair to take advantage of a war? And the answer is, if by not taking advantage I could stop the war or any aspect of it, I would do so immediately. But I can't stop a war, and somebody has to put them up when they come home. And you say, well, that was 40 years ago. So who went after the refugees from Sierra Leone when we had to sort that out? And who looked after the refugees who are likely to come in from the Ukraine? Someone's got to look after them, so we might as well, if they need hotels in our area.
Well, that reminds me, a few years ago, we'll all remember the ash cloud that came over from Iceland very suddenly, and the impact that had. At that time I was doing advisory work with hotels, and it was amazing how many hotels saw the opportunity and seized it to replace the business that wasn't coming because nobody was flying anywhere with people who weren't going where they wanted to go, so they were making them offers. So it still exists today. It's a question of being quick on your toes and seeing opportunities, isn't it? Are there any questions coming in from the floor? Because I'm sure there are some people here who are operating hotel businesses where you've got something which is maybe niggling in your mind.
Can I make the point that I'm going to stay a couple of hours after this? I'll be on the IOH stand, and if anybody wants to come and have a talk, I'll be very happy to talk to them.
And that stand is at 658, by the way, just down
658.
Just down the aisle here.
Let me turn, if I may, to one subject which I would love to put to you, and that is notices in hotels. Because I know that you've all got notices, and you know that every hotel, every single hotel, offers the clients the greatest welcome they are ever going to have. No hotel is going to offer a welcome as good as your welcome. And when the client drives up to the hotel, there is a sign which says what sort of welcome you can expect, because the sign says no parking. For 60 years I've tried to get the industry to put up very sorry no parking. Nobody will do it. And then you go into the hotel And this is now to be your second home, right? Every hotel advertises this is your second home. You're away from the family, you're away from your friends, but this is your second home. Absolutely guaranteed. And you can see they mean it because on the doors there is a sign, private. How many rooms in your house have got private on the door? The trouble with our notices and with our treatment of guests is that we're really not terribly sure that we want to look after them. You arrive in the hotel, you go up to the porter's desk and you say, I have an appointment with Mr. Jones. And the porter says, good afternoon, sir. I'll just check if you're a liar. Well, he doesn't actually use those words. What he says is, I'll tell Mr. Jones you're here, and until he confirms that you're expected, you will stand there with your coat on, because it's so much quicker to throw you out if you still got your coat on. And what should he say? How nice to see you, sir. May I take your coat? Would you like a seat in the lounge? May I offer you a cup of coffee? May I tell Mr. Jones your name, sir? That's what he should do. But then when the guest arrives at Mr. Jones, is it a surprise that Mr. Jones is aggravated? He's been treated like an interloper. And then you actually, now you're the chairman of a major company who wants to hold a major conference. And you're getting in touch with this hotel, and you want the hotel to use their chairman to look after you. It's so important. And you say conference and events department, and the phone is answered by somebody who says, this is the conference and events department, and I am a very junior employee. Well, they don't actually say I'm a very junior employee. What they say is, conference and events department, Susie speaking. Now, when you get in touch with the general manager's office, he doesn't answer the phone. General manager's office, Harry speaking. So why does she say Susie speaking? Because on the pecking order of senior people in the hotel, she is way down, and we have to prove to her she's way down, so we won't let her have a second name. Now you try and borrow £100 million from a merchant bank in the City of London, and the person who makes the tea is the assistant managing director. Who makes the tea? Because there's nobody in the company who is below assistant managing director. If you're borrowing £100 million, you're not going to deal with the tea lady, you're going to deal with the assistant managing director. And that is what we should be doing. My old chairman used to say to me, why do you call all your people manager? And I say, you're lucky I don't call them all chairman. So consequently, the signs in hotels and the way we treat the customers needs an enormous amount of rethinking. When you, sorry Peter, when you go into a lift, I've never been in a lift with you, right? I've never been with you in a lift, so how could I know what you do when you go into the lift? When you go into the lift, you turn around and you look at the doors. And you look at the numbers by the door in order to see when you reach the floor that you want to get off, right? We all do the same thing? And where is the advertising for the restaurant? It's in the ideal place for anybody who has eyes at the back of their head, because they're always behind you. And there's one hotel only that I've ever seen, the Hilton Hotel in Cairns in Australia, which actually has the advertising by the numbers, and that's where it should be. But if I come back to you in 50 years' time, I don't think I'm ever going to find that the advertising for the restaurant has moved near the numbers. So is it a surprise? And then you go up to the door of the restaurant, it's 5:30, and it's another question of operations versus sales. And what do you see on the door of the restaurant at 5:30? One word and one word only. Closed. Absolutely right, sir. What should it say? Open at 7 o'clock for the best steaks in town. Open at 7 o'clock and you'd be very welcome. And what does it say? Closed. And this goes on and on and on. Operational minded, never sales and marketing minded.
You may have picked up by now that Derek is what I call a contrarian. He flies in the face of everything and questions everything. And is that actually a very useful tip for somebody who wants to fill their hotel? Is that your secret for success?
I have a history degree, and in history at an advanced level, you have to find three people who hate each other, who all give the same account of a set of facts, before you can believe them. So when I first came into the industry, they said, this is the way we do it. And I said, why? And they said, what do you mean why? I just told you this is the way we do it. And I said, why? Because most of it is a load of rubbish, as you've now seen. Example of things which are going on all over the country. There's a hotel in Aberdeen where they have a long run up to the door, and on the run up to the door there are 5 signs. 4 say no parking and 1 says no entry. Well, what do you feel like when you arrive there? Hardly welcome. And all the time, when you go round your hotels and your restaurants and you say to yourself, I know everybody else does it that way, but does it make any sense? Let me tell you about selling wine. You don't let them get hold of the wine list, because that's the wine waiter, and there are only a few of them, and he says, will you be taking wine, sir? Because if you don't, I'm not going to give you the wine list. So now you get hold of the wine list, and the wine list is carefully designed so it's all in words you don't understand. Trockenbeeren, Auslese, Schwarzlese, Auslese, Mise en Bouteille, Chateau, etc. Nobody understands, and they all have numbers by them. 2012, 2000. Nobody explains why the hotels, why the wines are different prices. Now you have the wine, because you've ordered it, and you have white wine. And they have devised a way of ensuring that you don't pour your own wine. They take the wine bottle and they put it at the other end of the restaurant, right? In the bucket at the other end of the restaurant. So if you want your own wine, you have to get up or attract the guy's attention and go and get your own wine. But this doesn't work for red wines. So what we've done for red wines is we have invented a very fragile wicker basket. So if you pick it up clumsily, you will get red wine all down your front. And this is how we sell wine. I mean, it's all right for the Victorians, but it's no good for 2015, and yet they still do the same thing. In the book, you will find a wine cover, and this wine cover sold a large number of additional bottles of wine. That's what it looked like. Now, you may not have seen a wine cover that looks like that. I said I wanted cartoons. They said, why? I said, because everybody looks at cartoons. And they said, well, wouldn't that be rather vulgar? And I said, yes, we'll have a Botticelli ceiling. Now tell me it's vulgar. So we had a Botticelli ceiling of cherubs drinking wine. And everybody buys it. Now, take one wine. This is one of those wines called Visses, which is some dreadful French muck. And how are you going to sell it? Well, it's got 3 advantages. It's a bit better than Coca-Cola, it sounds French, and it's going to make the dinner more fun. So how do you describe it? As having a fine acid base? I mean, how could you sell acid? I can sell acid for a industrial purpose, but to drink? So how do we describe this dreadful French wine? French, fun, and fizzy. Because that's what it was. Those were the 3 things they wanted to buy. French, fun, and fizzy. And that is how we described it. Now I can fully understand if all the traditionalists in our audience say this is dreadful stuff, he ought to be taken out and hung. Which is interesting because the first special event was actually in 1840, where 400 people got on a train in Cornwall, in Wythenshawe, and went to Bodmin. 400 of them, all the hotels were filled, and the attraction was the fact that a merchant in Wythenshawe had been murdered by two men in Bodmin who had been caught and sentenced, and all the 400 had gone to see the public hanging. And that was the first special event that I ever found. Special events I do recommend to you because they are wonderful ways of making money.
Which actually bring... Are there any questions coming out from the floor? Anybody got anything they'd like to ask Derek? Okay, well I'm going to bash on then because I've still got my head full of questions for you, Derek. And we've talked about what goes wrong. We've talked about the negatives. Now let's talk about the positives. What are the best things you've ever seen in hotel? The best ideas you've ever seen? Maybe not even just your own, but things other people have done that have impressed you and you thought, well, that's a good solution here.
Well, of course, the most successful thing came about from what appeared to be a disaster. In the 1960s, the country went over to the 5-day week. It had been a 5.5-day week. Everybody worked Saturday morning. And as a consequence, the hotels did business from businessmen on Friday night. Well, when the country went over to a 5-day week, there was no need for businessmen to book in on Friday nights because they were working Saturday morning. And everybody said, well, that's the end of the industry. We might all of us pack up because obviously we're not going to have that business. And we said, great, because that gives us 2 days to sell short break holidays. And without the 5-day week, we couldn't have started short break holidays. And when we started them, we actually started them by asking British Rail if they worked with us, and they said no, we've got our own hotels. So we found a man in South Wales who was in charge of something down there for the railways, and we sold it to him. And I forgot, I've got a bad memory, I forgot to tell him we'd already been turned down by head office. And 2 years later, when we were moving thousands and thousands, head office found out, and it was too late to stop us. If they could have, they would have. British Rail did have a sales and marketing director. He had been in charge of steam railways, and when they moved over to electric, they said to him, Charlie, the only job we've got at your financial level is sales and marketing director, would you do that? And he said, yes, by all means. So the sales and marketing director was an expert on steam engineering.
And that was the best thing, was it? Creating those things?
Oh, I think short break holidays was the best thing we ever produced.
Yeah.
Special events also. And of course the emphasis on filling the very last bed. We used to have we used to have records given to us 3 months in advance of how full the hotel was going to be. And if the hotel wasn't full on the day they said it would be, a sales director would go down and go through the correspondence and find out why not. Correspondence research is something I would really ask you to have a look at. We were in Edinburgh and Scotland were playing France. And when Scotland played France, a lot of people come from France, and I said to the reservations manager, very fine hotel, have you got, is the hotel full for the international? And she said yes, and I said, you haven't taken any one-night bookings, have you? She said, no, only 2-night bookings. And I said, well, let's go down and look at the correspondence. So we found the correspondence in the basement. You can always find old correspondence. It's either in the basement or the attic. You'll never find it in the reservations of it, attic or basement. So we found it in the basement, and we looked through, and we found there had been a group that had come 2 years before, and that group had stayed 4 nights. They couldn't come back because we were full. We had lost £50,000 worth of turnover because 2 nights, 50 people at this hotel would have been £50,000. And what would happen if the bar's manager lost £50,000. The bar's manager will get a written warning. He had no future. It's a disaster. And what would have happened to the reservations manager? Nothing, because nobody would know that they had mucked up £50,000 worth of business.
I've just been given the 5-minute warning, so if anybody does have anything they'd like to ask, please stick your hand up. But can I just tell you something which was a revelation to me a few years ago? I was doing a very similar chat thing at another conference, another event, with a person who was then in charge of the travel for GlaxoSmithKline, and she had a hotel budget of something like $900 million. So a big buyer of hotel rooms. And I said, what's the most innovative thing you've done? And she said, 2 things. The first is, I found out when each of the hotels in my core program, and she had something like 400 hotels in the program, I found out when their peak dates are and when their trough dates are, and I've made sure that in the trough dates we get an extra low rate because of our drive. But then the second thing I've done is I've communicated that through the organisation, so when my people who travel, when the road warriors in SmithKline are planning their travel, they are incentivized to try and make them be in a town on a date when rooms are A, available, and B, available at a lower price. And that you know, as I say, I've been in hotel sales for a long time, and that for me was a real light bulb moment, wouldn't you agree? And I've told so many hoteliers about it since then, and it's a real way of steering business, because it's the troughs. You've got to devote most of your sales time to the bits that wouldn't fill otherwise, haven't you?
Well, I'll tell you one last story. Every year in London there is a major art fair, art exhibition, Stubbs, Tutankhamun Chinese art. And we went along to see the organisers, and we said, could we buy some tickets? And they said, certainly not, you'll queue around the block with everybody else. And we said, on Monday morning? And he said, nobody comes Monday morning. Why do you want tickets Monday morning? And we said, yes. And he said, well, how many? I said, how many have you got? Worked it out, 9,000. I said, can I buy 9,000? He thought Christmas had come. He gave me a reduction. They were about £2 each. We then contacted every public school in the country, and we said, if you want to see Tutankhamun, come down on Sunday, because the tickets are for Monday at 9:30, and then you can all see Tutankhamun. We sold 9,000 Sunday night bedrooms because we recognised the possibilities of Tutankhamun. You've got to get out there on the boondocks. You've got to get out there and think in different ways in order to fill, because we all know Sunday night's empty. Well, not if Tutankhamun's in town.
Great, and there are those exhibitions happening all over London. I've got one very last question, because I think I have 1 minute left. Is the revenue manager the enemy of the salesman? Revenue managers are now very powerful in hotels, aren't they?
If the revenue manager knows their business, how to sell, fine. Now, I was talking to a group of multinational general managers, and I said, this is the conversation. The client says how much, you say £5,000, and there is dead silence. What do you do now? So you've all given that thought, and I said every general manager will have written down the wrong answer, and every sales director will have written down the right answer. And since you've all worked out what the right answer is, I will tell you, the right answer is you say absolutely nothing until the client says, all right, I'll buy it. Now, if you knew that, you are well trained in selling. And if you had any other answer, you need the book.
Okay, you need the book. There's a place to close it. Thank you very much for your attention. I do hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll agree that Derek is a wonderfully engaging raconteur that comes through in trumps in the book. Thank you for joining us today, and can I wish you on behalf of us both a very enjoyable time here at the Hospitality Show. Thank you very much indeed.